Telemundo cameras are given rare access to Latin America's largest prison.
These are the most violent criminals in the country. This is where El Salvador's president has offered to house some deportees from the United States.
Imagine a place so fearsome that even the most hardened criminals pray they never end up there. A prison built not just to hold inmates, but to make them disappear. A place where the walls don't just keep people in, they erase them from existence. Welcome to El Salvador's Terrorist Confinement Center, a fortress designed not for rehabilitation but for total and absolute control. Home to over 40,000 of the most dangerous gang members, this facility represents the extreme lengths one nation has taken to eradicate crime. But behind these towering walls and razor wire fences lies a world that few will ever see. A world where human rights are an afterthought, survival is a daily struggle, and fear is the only constant. But what really goes on inside this high-security fortress? How did El Salvador become the most controversial battleground in the war on crime? And is this extreme approach truly the answer to gang violence or a ticking time bomb? Stay with me, because by the end of this video you might question everything you thought about justice. A few years ago, El Salvador was drowning in crime. Murder was an everyday occurrence. Extortion was part of life. The country had one of the highest homicide rates in the world, controlled by ruthless gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18. In some neighborhoods, stepping outside after dark was a death sentence. Businesses paid protection fees just to operate. Families lived in fear, unsure if their loved ones would make it home. Then, one man changed everything. President Nayib Bukele declared war on gangs, launching a nationwide crackdown unlike anything seen before. Under a state of emergency, police had nearly unlimited power to arrest suspected gang members, without warrants, without trials, without questions. In just months, tens of thousands were rounded up and thrown into prisons. And in the heart of it all, a facility that would become a symbol of Bukele's iron-fisted rule. Built in record time, this mega-prison is designed to crush the spirit of its inhabitants. It has no windows, no sunlight, and no visits from human rights organizations. The cells, originally meant to house 40 inmates, now hold over 100, forcing prisoners to sleep standing up. There are no beds, no blankets, just concrete floors. Food is rationed, medical care is non-existent, and guards patrol with absolute authority. It's a place meant to break men, and yet, despite the brutality, many Salvadorans support it. They call it a necessary evil, a final solution to a decades-long crisis. But is it truly a solution? Or is this the beginning of something far darker? Inside, survival is a different game. The inmates, once the most feared gangsters on the streets, are now just numbers. Their heads are shaved, their tattoo-covered bodies exposed as a mark of their past. They sit in absolute silence, heads down, hands behind their backs, their fate in the hands of the guards who oversee them. There are no fights because the punishment is worse than death. Disobedience is met with extreme force, sometimes torture. Food is a privilege, not a right. Many prisoners will never see the outside world again. But here's the real shocker. For the first time in decades, gang activity on the streets has nearly vanished. With leaders locked away, extortion, murders, and kidnappings have dropped dramatically. Families can walk through their neighborhoods without fear. Businesses can operate without paying for protection. El Salvador's crime rate has plummeted, making it one of the safest countries in Latin America. But there's a catch. What happens when you pack 40,000 violent criminals into one pressure cooker with no release valve? The system isn't built for rehabilitation, only punishment. And when men have nothing left to lose, desperation takes over. Reports of brutal treatment, starvation, and abuse are leaking out. Guards have absolute power, and some use it without mercy. No one is watching, no one is coming to help. And when desperation reaches a breaking point, chaos is inevitable. Could this be creating an even bigger problem? But even in a place designed to break men, human nature refuses to be erased so easily. Some prisoners still find ways to communicate, passing messages through coded hand signals or smuggling notes despite the ever-watchful eyes of guards. It's a reminder that no matter how extreme the conditions, people will always search for a way to connect, to resist, to hold on to a shred of their former selves. The question is, how long before the pressure becomes too much? Prisons, especially ones built on fear and suppression, are like dormant volcanoes. They seem controlled, silent, and inescapable, until one day they erupt. A single act of defiance, a guard who pushes too far, or a moment of collective desperation could be all it takes to spark a riot unlike anything El Salvador has ever seen. And in a facility designed for total control, a loss of that control would be catastrophic. The very policies that have made the streets safe could be creating a time bomb within these walls. Because eventually, something has to give. If rehabilitation isn't an option, if escape is impossible, and if mercy is non-existent, then the only thing left is destruction. The world has seen what happens when prisons overflow with desperation. The infamous Attica riot in the U.S., the deadly uprisings in Brazil's overcrowded penitentiaries. History warns us that an iron grip can only hold for so long before it shatters. The only question now is, how long does El Salvador have? The outside world is watching. Human rights organizations are sounding the alarm, calling this a violation of basic freedoms. Reports have surfaced that thousands of innocent people have been caught in the dragnet, arrested simply for looking suspicious. Others were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Families are left in agony, searching for answers, hoping their loved ones haven't been swallowed by the system. Some former gang members, men who had left the criminal life behind, are now behind bars again. Their crimes? Tattoos they got as teenagers, old affiliations they had long abandoned. But in this new system there is no redemption, only judgment. And then there's the real nightmare scenario. What happens when the government no longer needs a reason to arrest people? Today, it's gang members. Tomorrow, it could be political opponents, journalists, or anyone who dares to speak out. This is the slippery slope of unchecked power. And let's not forget the psychological toll. Imagine being confined in a space where you have no control over your life. Every moment is dictated by an unbreakable routine, your body slowly wasting away from malnutrition, your mind crushed under the weight of hopelessness. Some prisoners are already showing signs of severe mental deterioration, hallucinations, paranoia, and complete emotional breakdowns. This isn't just a prison, it's a psychological experiment in human suffering. How long can a person endure such an existence before they completely lose themselves? Beyond the walls, El Salvador is experiencing a paradox. The streets are safer, but at what cost? Entire communities have been reshaped by this purge, with thousands of children growing up without fathers, families shattered overnight. Schools that once struggled to keep kids out of gangs now struggle to keep them from fearing the government itself. And when those children grow up, what will they believe in? A country that saved them from violence, or a nation that traded freedom for control? El Salvador has transformed, but at what cost? Will this mega prison be remembered as the ultimate solution to a crime crisis, or the beginning of something even more terrifying? Because history has shown us that when a government starts sacrificing freedom for security, the people always pay the price. So, what do you think? Has El Salvador found the secret to ending crime? Or is this a human rights disaster waiting to explode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video eye-opening, you won't want to miss what's happening in the country's war on corruption. Click here to watch now.